The human advantage. The Selfar warship Kavrak moved silently through space. It was a massive vessel, dark and menacing, with weapons capable of destroying entire fleets. It had crushed many enemies before, and now it faced humans. Inside the command center, General Varkas stood tall, his scales shimmering under the dim red lights. His yellow eyes scanned the holographic display in front of him. The battlefield stretched out in deep space, and right in the middle of it was a single human warship. One ship, Varkas growled, his voice rough. This must be a joke. Humans were known for their reckless courage, but this, sending one ship against the Selfar fleet, it was foolish. Varkas turned to his second-in-command, Officer Creel, who looked just as confused. General, our scanners confirm it, Creel said. Only one human ship detected. Varkas smirked. Destroy them. Fire all cannons. The ship's massive plasma turrets turned, glowing bright with deadly energy. The gunners locked onto the human vessel. Within seconds, a barrage of plasma fire streaked across space, heading straight for the lone enemy. Then, something impossible happened. Right before impact, the human ship vanished. A deep silence filled the command center. Varkas' expression darkened. He turned to Creel. Where did they go? Creel's fingers danced over the controls, scanning frantically. I don't know, General. They disappeared from our sensors. That's impossible, Varkas hissed. No ship can vanish like that. The Selfar were one of the most advanced species in the galaxy. Their scanners could detect anything: ships, cloaking devices, even subtle energy fluctuations. But this time, there was nothing. Then, boom! A violent explosion rocked the Selfar warship. The command center shook as alarms blared across the ship. Varkas grabbed onto the control panel, his sharp claws digging into the metal. Damage report, he barked. Creel's voice trembled. Direct hit to our left engine, General. Shields were still active, but the blast came from an unknown location. Varkas clenched his fists. How can they fire at us if we can't see them? The human ship reappeared on the scanners, but in a completely different location. It was behind them now, moving fast. They're playing with us, Varkas realized. His tail flicked in frustration. They attacked, vanished, and reappeared in a new position. They know exactly what they're doing. Another explosion rocked the ship. The Selfar crew scrambled to their positions, their reptilian faces tense with fear. Varkas knew what they were all thinking. Humans weren't just attacking. They were hunting. A different kind of enemy. Adjust our targeting systems, Varkas commanded. Predict their movements. Creel worked fast, recalibrating the scanners, but before he could finish, the ship shook violently again. More damage, more confusion. The human ship was faster, smarter, deadlier than they had imagined. They aren't fighting like normal warriors, Creel whispered. They're using tactics we've never seen before. Varkas growled. Humans don't fight fair. They never have. Selfar warriors believed in power, strength, and overwhelming force. When they fought, they conquered. But humans fought to win, with tricks, deception, and unpredictable strategies. Suddenly, a voice echoed through the command center speakers. It was a human transmission. Selfar warship, you are outmatched. Surrender now, or be destroyed. The voice was calm, cold, completely confident. Varkas sneered. Surrender to humans. Never. He turned to his weapons officer. Fire at will. If we can't see them, shoot everywhere. Plasma blasts erupted from the warship in all directions. The space around them glowed with fire and destruction. But there was no impact. No human ship. Only silence. Then, boom! A final explosion. This one was different. The Selfar command center flickered as power systems failed. Creel gasped. They hit our targeting systems. We can't lock onto them anymore. The reality was sinking in. The XLFAR were blind. Varkas stared at the blank scanner screen, feeling something he had never felt before. Fear. The trap closes. Then, another voice. Not human this time. It was their own eye. Warning. Multiple enemy ships detected. Cloaked vessels now visible. Varkas's blood ran cold. The humans had never been alone. Suddenly, dozens of human warships decloaked, surrounding the Selfar fleet. They had been waiting, watching, letting the Selfar panic, waste their energy, make mistakes. This was their plan all along, Creel whispered, his eyes wide with terror. The human ships opened fire, and Varkas knew in that moment they had already lost. The unseen threat. The Selfar warship Kavarak was no longer a hunter, it was the hunted. Inside the command center, General Varkas clenched his fists. The situation was spiraling out of control. Their scanners were blind, their targeting systems were damaged, and now multiple human warships had appeared out of nowhere. They were never alone, Varkas muttered, his voice tight with anger. They lured us into a trap. Creel's scaled face was pale. General, what are your orders? Varkas took a deep breath. He needed to think. The XLFAR were stronger, but strength meant nothing if they couldn't see their enemy. Humans were using a new kind of warfare, one that Selfar commanders were never trained to fight. And that was exactly why the humans were winning. A game of shadows. Reboot the sensors, Varkas commanded. Switch to thermal tracking. If we can't see them, we'll find their heat signatures. Creel obeyed, typing in the commands. The main screen flickered as the ship's systems tried to recover. Nothing. The humans were too smart. Their ships emitted no heat, no energy spikes, nothing that traditional scanners could track. Varkas's tail twitched. His mind raced for answers. Humans were hiding in plain sight. That's when the lights flickered. Varkas's breath caught. What was that? Creel's fingers flew across the control panel. General, they're not just attacking from outside. They're inside the ship. The silent invasion. Before Varkas could respond, the ship's internal alarms blared. Hull breach detected. Tech 7. Intruders aboard. Varkas's heart pounded. Impossible. No ship has docked with us. Creel shook his head. They must have used boarding pods. Silent. Stealth drops. They were inside before we even knew they were here. The realization sent a chill down Varkas's spine. The humans weren't just attacking them from the outside. They had already infiltrated the ship. Fighting ghosts. Seal off Deck 7. Varkas roared. Deploy all security forces. Creel hit the lockdown command. The doors slammed shut, trapping the invaders, or so they thought. Moments later, the security feed from Deck 7 went black. One by one, all cameras and sensors on that deck were shutting down. Creel's voice shook. We've lost contact with the security team. Varkas gritted his teeth. How many humans boarded? Creel looked at the last scan before the cameras died. His voice barely came out. Only 5. 5 humans, against hundreds of Selfar warriors. And yet, the humans were winning. The elite strike team. The Selfar warriors on Deck 7 were some of the finest soldiers in the fleet, heavily armored, trained for war, and armed with plasma rifles. And yet, they were dying one by one. The problem wasn't strength. The problem was speed. The humans moved like shadows. They struck and vanished. By the time a warrior turned to fire, the human was already gone. Screams filled the communication channels. Gunfire echoed through the halls. The Selfar warriors tried to fight, but the humans were too fast, too precise. Varkas listened, his anger growing. This isn't war, he muttered. This is extermination. The message. Then the ship's intercom crackled to life. A voice, cold, calm, and human, spoke through the speakers. General Varkas, your ship belongs to us now. The voice was inside the command center. Varkas and Creel spun around, weapons drawn. But the room was empty. No humans in sight. No explanation for how the voice had gotten in. Only one chilling realization. They were already surrounded. The first strike. The Selfar command center was eerily silent. Too silent. General Varkis's grip tightened around his plasma rifle. His reptilian eyes darted around the dimly lit room, searching for movement. Nothing. The human's voice had come from the intercom, inside the command center, but there was no sign of an intruder. Creel's hands trembled over the control panel. His voice was barely a whisper. How did they get into our systems? No one has ever breached Selfar encryption before. Varkis didn't answer. His mind was racing. The humans had disabled their scanners, infiltrated their ship. And now, they were inside the command center itself. A chill ran down his spine. This was no ordinary battle. This was a hunt. The shadow attack. Then, the lights flickered. A shadow moved in the far corner of the room. Fast. Too fast. Varkis spun, raising his weapon, but there was nothing there. His claws twitched. Were his eyes playing tricks on him? Then, a flash of motion. A blur. Before he could react, a powerful force slammed into one of his officers. The Selfar soldier was lifted off his feet and hurled across the room like a ragdoll. He crashed against the metal wall with a sickening crack. The room erupted in chaos. Plasma bolts lit up the darkness, streaking through the air. Zelfar warriors fired wildly, but there was nothing to shoot at. The humans weren't standing still. They were moving. Fast. Too fast. The human advantage. Up close. Another Zelfar warrior screamed as a human appeared out of nowhere, striking with a blade that cut through armor like paper. The soldier collapsed, his weapon clattering to the floor. Varkis saw it then. One of them. A human, clad in dark armor, silent, deadly, and precise. He didn't fight like a warrior. He fought like a ghost. One moment he was there, the next gone. Varkis barely caught a glimpse before another soldier was dragged into the shadows, disappearing from sight. The command center was turning into a slaughterhouse. The unthinkable happens. Fall back. Varkis roared. Regroup. Get to the emergency exits. His warriors scrambled for the doors, but they wouldn't open. Creel's eyes widened in horror. General, the humans have locked us inside. Trapped. Like prey in a cage. Varkis's breathing was heavy. He had fought wars for decades, crushed entire civilizations, but never had he faced an enemy like this. The Selfar prided themselves on strength and power. The humans fought with something else. They fought with precision, intelligence, ruthlessness. They didn't waste energy. They didn't hesitate. They simply eliminated their enemies, one by one. And now, they were here. The first face-to-face encounter. The last of the Selfar warriors fell, leaving only Varkis and Creel standing. Then, footsteps. Slow, deliberate. A figure stepped out of the shadows. A human. He was clad in sleek black armor, his face hidden behind a reflective visor. A long, serrated blade gleamed in his hand, still dripping with Selfar blood. Varkis snarled. Face me in a real fight, human. Prove you are not a coward. The human tilted his head slightly, as if amused. Then he spoke. You already lost, General. This was never a fight. Varkis's blood ran cold, because deep down, he knew the human was right. This wasn't a battle. This was an execution, and humanity had already won. The psychological war. The silence in the command center was suffocating. The air smelled of burnt circuits and blood. The only sound was the slow, deliberate footsteps of the human warrior as he moved closer to General Varkis. Varkis tightened his grip on his plasma rifle. He had fought in countless battles, led invasions across the galaxy, and crushed weaker species without mercy. But this was different. This was fear. He had never felt it before, not like this. The human soldier in front of him wasn't large, not by Selfar standards. He wasn't armored like a tank, and yet he had single-handedly turned this warship into a tomb. The human stopped a few steps away. His helmet's reflective visor revealed nothing. No emotion, no hesitation, just cold efficiency. Then he spoke. "Tell me, General, how does it feel to be powerless?" Varkis's jaw clenched. "We are the HFY. We do not fear." The human moved, so fast that Varkis barely saw it, just a blur of motion. Then pain. A burning sensation shot through his hand. His plasma rifle clattered to the floor, cut in half by the human's blade. He hadn't even seen the attack. Varkis staggered back, clutching his injured hand. Creel, standing frozen nearby, let out a strangled gasp. The human tilted his head. "You do now." The breaking point. The ship's intercom crackled. The AI's voice, cold and neutral, spoke. Crew morale dropping. Enemy tactics unpredictable. Calculated survival rate, 12%. Varkis gritted his teeth. 12%. The XLFR were warriors. Their species did not surrender. Their empire had conquered dozens of planets, wiped out civilizations that resisted. And yet, for the first time, their fleet eye was calculating defeat. Creel, trembling, whispered, "General, we have to retreat." Varkis whipped around, his eyes burning with fury. "We do not retreat." But even as he said the words, he knew the truth. This wasn't a battle anymore. It was a demonstration. The humans weren't just winning. They were teaching the Selfar a lesson. And the worst part, they were enjoying it. The message from humanity. The human warrior pressed a button on his wrist. A transmission played across the ship's main screen. A new human appeared, a high-ranking officer, sitting in a command chair aboard another ship. A fleet commander. His expression was calm, but his words were ice. "General Varkis, your forces are now at our mercy. Your ships are blind, your weapons are useless, and your soldiers are afraid." The officer leaned forward. "Consider this a warning. You thought humans were weak. You thought we would kneel." The screen zoomed out, revealing an entire human fleet surrounding the Selfar forces. Hundreds of warships. Silent. Waiting. "Next time, we won't be so kind," the human officer said. "Surrender now, or be erased." The transmission cut out. The impossible decision. Varkis's claws dug into his palms. He felt the weight of his entire species pressing down on him. Surrender. To humans. Unthinkable. But if he refused, his ship would be destroyed. His fleet would be wiped from existence. The Selfar Empire would learn of his failure. Varkis's breathing was heavy. His pride screamed at him to fight, to die with honor. But the human standing in front of him, he was waiting, watching, like a predator that already knew its prey was broken. Varkis closed his eyes. His defeat was already written. Slowly, he reached for the control panel and pressed the button. "This is General Varkis. We surrender." A deep silence followed. The human warrior tilted his head, as if considering something. Then he turned, walking toward the exit. Just before stepping out, he said one last thing. "Smart choice. But next time, we won't give you one." And just like that, he was gone. The humans had won. The human advantage. The command center of the Selfar warship Kavarak was silent. Too silent. General Varkis stood frozen, his claws curled into fists. The words he had just spoken, "Iwi, surrender," echoed in his mind like a death sentence. Creel, his second in command, still looked shaken, his yellow eyes wide with disbelief. The humans had done the impossible. The Exelfar, once feared across the stars, had just bowed to an inferior species. Or at least, that's what they had once believed. Now, the truth was clear. Humans were not weak. They were not inferior. They were predators. A ruthless efficiency. The human warrior who had infiltrated the command center was gone. He had disappeared as easily as he had arrived. vanishing into the corridors of the ship like a shadow. But his presence still lingered. Every Selfar officer in the room felt it. They had just witnessed something they had never experienced before: true fear. Creel swallowed hard, his voice shaky. "General, what now?" Varkas turned toward the ship's main display. The human fleet surrounded them, massive warships looming in the void of space. Silent, unmoving, waiting. Humans never wasted energy. They had already won. They had already proven their dominance. And now, they were simply watching, waiting for the Selfar to comply. Because they knew resistance was pointless. The fall of the Selfar war fleet. Across the communication channels, Varkas heard the reports from other Selfar ships. "This is Warship Malker. We have lost our targeting systems. Our weapons are disabled. Warship Graxtor, we are surrounded. Enemy ships have blocked all escape routes. Warship Zelke, we have been boarded. Our soldiers are falling one by one." Every voice was filled with panic, desperation, defeat. Varkas' claws tightened around the console. This was worse than a battle lost. This was a humiliation. The mighty Selfar war fleet, feared across the galaxy, had just been outmaneuvered, outgunned, and outclassed by a species they had underestimated. The lesson humanity taught. A transmission came through. The human fleet commander. The same officer who had spoken before, his face calm but his tone ice-cold. "General Varkas, you and your fleet are now under human control." The Selfar general growled but said nothing. The human leaned forward slightly. "You thought your numbers made you strong. You thought your technology made you unstoppable. You thought your empire was untouchable." A pause. "You were wrong." Varkas' jaw clenched. Every word cut deeper than any blade. The human continued, merciless in his lesson. "Strength is not in numbers. Power is not in brute force. Real strength is knowing how to use what you have. Real power is knowing how to break your enemy before the fight even begins." The screen zoomed out, revealing a full tactical display of the battlefield. It was a massacre. Zelfar warships, helpless and crippled, surrounded by an untouched human fleet. The Selfar had come expecting an easy victory. Instead, they had walked into a perfect trap. Varkas couldn't deny it anymore. Humanity had outplayed them. A warning to the Selfar Empire. The human commander's expression remained unreadable. "Tell your leaders what happened here today, General." A sharp silence followed. Then the human's voice darkened. "Tell them that humanity is no longer prey." The transmission ended. A new reality. Varkas stood there, staring at the darkened screen. His pride, his honor, his entire belief system had just been shattered. The Selfar were not the strongest in the galaxy. Humanity was. And the worst part, this was just the beginning. The final stand. General Varkas stood motionless, his mind racing as the human fleet loomed over his crippled warships. The silence in the command center was thick with defeat, the weight of humiliation pressing down on every Selfar officer present. The humans hadn't just won the battle. They had torn apart everything that Selfar believed in. The mighty war fleet, once feared across the stars, had been reduced to helpless targets in a matter of hours. Their warriors, trained in brute force and overwhelming firepower, had been outmatched, outmaneuvered, and outthought. The Selfar Empire had just suffered its greatest defeat, but Varkas was not ready to accept it. Not yet. The last desperate move. Varkas turned sharply toward Creel, who was still shaken, his hands hovering over the controls as if afraid to touch them. "How many functional weapons do we have left?" Varkas growled. Creel hesitated. "General." "Answer me, Creel." Varkas barked. Creel's fingers trembled as he checked the system reports. His voice was weak. "One plasma cannon. Half power. It's barely operational." Varkas' mind whirled with possibilities. The humans believed the fight was over. They had already declared victory. And that, Varkas thought, was their mistake. His claws tightened into a fist. A wounded beast is still dangerous. If he could take out their flagship, maybe, just maybe, he could turn the tide. If the humans thought they had already won, then they wouldn't expect a final strike. One last stand. The final order. Varkas straightened, his scales gleaming under the dim red lights of the damaged command center. His pride and rage burned inside him. He turned to his officers, his voice like steel. Prepare the last cannon. Target the human flagship. Fire on my command. Creel's eyes widened in shock. General, we've already surrendered. If we attack now, they'll destroy us completely. Varkas' tail flicked in irritation. They will destroy us anyway. We may die, but we will die as warriors, not as cowards. Silence fell over the room. The HFY were warriors. It was all they knew. And if they were to fall, they would fall fighting. Creel hesitated, but then his hands moved over the console, targeting the human flagship. The plasma cannon whirred to life, weak but functional. A single shot could still cripple the human command ship. Varkas' breathing was steady. He would not go down without a fight. Fire. The unexpected response. But the shot never came. The moment the cannon was about to fire, the entire ship went dark. Systems offline. Weapons disabled. Engines dead. The humans had just shut everything down. Varkas' eyes widened in horror. What? Then, over the ship's speakers, a human voice echoed through the darkness. Did you really think we wouldn't predict that? Varkas froze. The humans had known he would try one last desperate move. They had anticipated it, and they had already taken steps to stop him before he even acted. Creel gasped. They've hacked into our systems. We're completely at their mercy. Varkas' claws dug into the console. His rage was boiling. This was worse than defeat. This was powerlessness, and he hated it. The final warning. A transmission opened on the main screen. The human fleet commander was there again, his expression calm but his eyes hard. I thought you were smarter than this, General Varkas. Varkas snarled but said nothing. The human leaned forward. This was your one warning. Next time, we won't shut down your systems. Next time, we will erase your entire fleet before you even know we're there. The cold certainty in his voice sent a chill down Varkas' spine. This wasn't a threat. It was a promise. The true meaning of power. Varkas finally understood. The humans hadn't just beaten the HFY. They had rewritten the rules of war. The HFY fought with brute force. The humans fought with strategy, patience, and precision. And that made them far more dangerous. For the first time in his life, Varkas felt something he had never known before. Respect. And fear. The message. The HFY warship Kavrak drifted in silence, powerless in the void of space. The once mighty flagship of the HFY fleet was now nothing more than a prison, its weapons disabled, its engines offline, and its crew broken. General Varkas stood at the center of the darkened command room. His officers, once proud warriors, now sat in stunned silence, their eyes hollow with the weight of defeat. The humans had done something far worse than destroy them. They had humiliated them, and now they were about to send a message, not just to the HFY, but to the entire galaxy. The transmission begins. The main display flickered to life. The human fleet commander appeared once more, his expression as cold as deep space itself. The humans had already won. They didn't need to do anything else. But this was about something more than just a battle. This was about making sure that HFY never forgot. General Varkas, the human commander, spoke. His voice was steady, emotionless. Your fleet is in our hands. Your empire is listening. Your people will hear these words, and they will remember them. Varkas said nothing. He could feel the eyes of his officers on him, waiting, hoping, for some last act of defiance. But he had none left to give. The humans had already predicted his every move, outplayed him at every turn. The war was over. And now, humanity was writing its victory into history, a warning to the galaxy. The human commander continued. Let this battle be a lesson, not just to the Excelfar, but to every empire that watches from the shadows, waiting for humanity to fall. He leaned forward, his eyes like fire. We are not prey. We are not weak. And we will not kneel. The words rang out across the ship, across the Excelfar fleet, across every open transmission in the sector. Every species in the galaxy, allies, enemies, and neutral parties alike, were now hearing the same message. A warning, a new reality. Humanity had arrived, and they were no longer asking for respect. They were taking it. The final blow. The human commander's voice dropped lower, colder. You were given a chance to walk away. You chose war. Now you understand what it means to challenge humanity. Then the screen zoomed out, showing a live view of the Excelfar fleet. Hundreds of Excelfar warships, once part of the Empire's proud military, now floated powerless in the void, surrounded by the untouched human armada. The scale of the defeat was undeniable. Then the human commander spoke the final words that would shake the Excelfar Empire to its core. Leave this system, return to your leaders, and tell them, we are watching. The walk of shame. General Varkas felt the weight of those words. Every Excelfar officer in the room knew what this meant. They were not being destroyed. They were being sent back. Not as warriors. As survivors. As proof of humanity's power. Varkas had been spared not out of mercy, but out of cruelty. Because now, he would have to face his own people and tell them the truth. The Excelfar, once feared conquerors, had been completely and utterly defeated. And the humans, they had barely even tried. The aftermath. The human fleet didn't move as the Excelfar ships, now freed from their lockdowns, began their slow, painful retreat. No human ships fired. No final blows were dealt. Because the lesson had already been delivered. As the damaged and humiliated Excelfar fleet limped away, heading back to their empire, General Varkas stood in silence. His claws dug into his palms, his heart burned with rage and shame. But beneath it all, there was something far worse. A new kind of fear. Because deep down, he knew the truth. The Excelfar were no longer the apex predators of the galaxy. Humanity was. And from this day forward, the universe would never be the same again. The end.